Hello again and welcome back to RP-0 America. Well, here we are in lovely low Earth orbit still, around roughly a 300 by 300 kilometer orbit, and we are we've done an orbit around or something on that order. I have set up a maneuver node. It took quite a bit of testing, and then I also fiddled with KSP TOT, which is a MATLAB coded planning tool, which is super cool for, I want later to be able to do Venus flyby and return to Earth, or Mars flyby, return to Earth, or flyby. Both of them would be awesome. And it's a tricky tool, but I've actually potentially got some useful info out of it. Like, I don't think it's a hopeless endeavor, so I'm pleased by that. So anyway, so let us just take a look at the maneuver node I've set up to see if it is crazy or not. So it does require a 240 meter per second correction here when we're near the moon, and at that point near the moon, why is it not telling me the altitude? Anyway, the point is I wanted this maneuver should be within 5,000 kilometers of the moon. Now I'd hope to be doing a closer flyby, but I just don't have the delta V in the Gemini to twist this, and maybe I'll talk more about that during the video. But let's see, the actual requirements of this contract are I need to be by the moon below 5,000 kilometers above the moon for it to be considered a lunar flyby. Crude lunar, oh weird, that's the wrong name. I should probably note that down so I can check, because it's not a lunar orbital, it's a crude lunar flyby just as a name. This set of conditions should be called the crude lunar flyby, which is what I'm attempting to accomplish. Alright, so I set up a maneuver for that, as you can see here, and it's a bit tricky. So we kind of fly behind the moon, and then the moon's gravitation will arc our trajectory a bit, and that will cause us to not actually free return, and we'll show you why. And so therefore we'll have to do a correction when we're that close to the moon in order to get our successful return to Earth. Sorry for keep switching back and forth. I'm not sure why there's that kind of delay. I'm getting closer to the point where I'm just going to have to kind of refresh all my graphics mods, because they look nice and everything, very nice, but they could look nicer, and they do kind of have weird little pauses like that sometimes that I don't know the reason for. Let's change the camera to free. Just free cam always seems to work nicer. So time is ticking away. You can see I'm losing liquid hydrogen every second because this is not a well-insulated tank at all. I even did some experiments in this, in my pre-tests for this, where I would, I should probably lock the tanks on this re-entry module such that I will kind of retain that fuel on the way. I also tried locking this during the service module, and just try to control our orientation pre-burn with these, but these only burn in two directions. So you can see if I go hit A and D, those don't move. It's not jetting, but W and S. I think it's S. The S key on my keyboard has now been worn away. So I have to leave the service module on to actually be able to get the position orientation I want. So I'm just letting the craft kind of wander towards that position of the maneuver node I've set, and I think I'll I'll vent some of the liquid oxygen. I also did a little bit of testing with that. I've never really done that, but I've seen Nathan Kell do it enough in submissions, and a few other people use it that I've kind of understand or felt comfortable enough, so I tried it out, and indeed it works very nicely. Alright, so first things first, let's point at the node. So liquid oxygen also boils off, just much slower, and it might be the dynamics of the tank that when something changes phase, it absorbs energy, and so it therefore cools things down. So it's cooling down the other liquid hydrogen, and it might also be cooling down the other liquid oxygen such that it does not boil off at all, for all I know, with the liquid hydrogen boiling off so much. Okay, so we're nice and pointed. Let's set up SAS. And I might let MechJeb carry out this maneuver. I'm not quite sure yet. Probably. But I won't let it warp to that time, because shortly before that time, once we've had a chance to lose more of our liquid hydrogen to boil off, I want to be able to kind of level off the tank. Sorry, kind of wish there was a way to have a nice little black background in this so it didn't get obscured depending on what's going on below us. So where are we now? I don't quite recognize it from things. There's water, kind of interesting terrain over there in that distance, as well as here. Maybe it's just a part of Africa I don't recognize. I'm sure that's a possibility. There are definitely parts of the world, as well as Africa, that I don't recognize. Oh, it is. I'm more just south of the area that I recognize the best, because it's the territory where you pass over on your first orbit out of KSC. And yeah, there's Madagascar coming up. All right, so we're 15 minutes out from there. Let's just warp just a little more. It's going to be a fairly short burn. We've got lots of extra delta V. And I even did end up using a little bit of residual fuel in this to do my correction during one of my tests, like my correction at the moon, which I think is really unrealistic and crazy, but I just wanted to see how much residual fuel did stick around that far. All right, so we're getting closer. And it wasn't a lot, but because this is such a powerful stage compared to this relatively light payload of like 3.5 tons, it was enough to do most of the correction. So let's see, let's open up. So if I peg the tank here, so you can see, just pin it open, you can see I've got way more liquid oxygen than I need. And so I want to go to liquid oxygen. Liquid oxygen, there we go, and it'll give me options, and it's the Centaur tank, and I want to dump some. So when I click dump, that number is going to start going down, and then I want to stop it at some point. So I'll stop just so you can actually pay attention a little differently now. So I'm just dumping from this. I also have liquid oxygen in here for the fuel cell, for life support, that I should activate now, that I don't want to give up. But notice this delta V will be increasing, and that's the whole reason I'm doing this. Because I have an excess of liquid oxygen, we'd effectively be carrying liquid oxygen further than we actually need to. In fact, I could probably go below parity, because we're still going to lose a little bit while we get there. But yeah, towards close to parity is good enough. All right, and now I will basically set things up. I saw Nathan. I'm by no means up on all of Nathan Kell's videos. I'm just kind of watching some of the more recent ones as they come out, just to see where he is, and still catching up on the old ones. But he, in one video recently, he was like, okay, and we'll Aaaand, because if we don't, MechJeb does crazy things, and I don't know exactly why or what crazy things. He may have already mentioned that in a previous video, the details of that issue, but he just references it as an it is known type fact. But I'll do that as well, because I have noticed recently, execute next node, that MechJeb does act crazier. Sometimes it'll just carry out the action, and I wonder if that does correlate to whether the engines are stable or not. All right, so we're still in a little bit of time warp. We'll need to make sure that we render these engines stable before the burn. Yeah, it looks like it's, oh, it burned. Okay, maybe. See, with these a liquid hydrogen tank that's as leaky as this one, often when you come out of time warp, it's going to, as a pulse, it's going to release. It's going to kind of simulate the acceleration you'd get from the loss of those fuels. The boil-off of the liquid hydrogen, and so that'll be a little pulse of g-forces, which can often stabilize the fuel. So some tanks will just stay stable because there's so much boil-off, that there's a sufficient amount of boil-off to keep the fuel pretty stable. Right, so it's carrying out this burn on the way to the moon. I'll kind of time accelerate through a bit of this, because I mean it's just a MechJeb controlled burn. It's going to be a pretty forceful, this burn, because it already started around 1G, but really any kind of mission profile I've ever seen does get to a fairly decent G-force, or at least in the range I consider decent, in throwing people to a TLI, throwing them through over 3,000 meters per second of delta V change. But yeah, the KSP TOT planning program, you just search that on the forum, you'll find it. It's a tricky program. I've tried it once or twice and just not gotten anything sane out of it, but I watched a video by Shimmy, or Shimmy the JJ, on Twitch. Well, not the whole video, it's a hugely long video, but he just does things in there that I didn't realize you could do. Like, there are neat things just visible and options in various right-click menus I simply had not been aware existed. So that is an example. And also Thason was doing similar things and kind of talking me through some of the findings he was having, and so thanks to both of those guys for making it easier for me to do what I wanted to do. Okay, so if I'm just going to delay, this is just kind of a maneuver to check how much delta V it took, but ultimately anything like this is going to be imprecise enough that I will need to recalculate this. I'm just going to have to recreate this maneuver to get us in a free return, or a non-free return, just get an Earth return. So it's a free return would be a burn like I just did, where it's going to fly by the moon, just actually far enough away from it in such a way that we still get a free re-entry. But here you can see, after the burn we just did, we're going to get close to the moon, which is nice, but this purple arc is the new path we're going to be in after we leave the influence of the moon, and the closest we get to Earth is 63, like basically above geostationary orbit, so nowhere near home, nowhere near a return. So we'll have to do a correction burn here to get on a return trajectory into the Earth's atmosphere. But first off, of course, we want to make sure this is in fact close enough for a mission. It is. We will be getting to within 5,000 kilometers of the Earth, which is, or of the moon, which is awesome. We're not going to be over a very brightly lit portion of it, but that's okay. We will survive that. All right, so I'm pretty sure I just kind of fiddled with hundreds of meters per second in doing this. So I just kind of did this by, like, because the reference frame of at that point of the moon isn't really correlated or aligned with what I actually want to do here. It was just really just button mashing to get what I wanted here. So for example, there I mashed that button, and oh look, a burn like that will get me closer to Earth, and that same thing, that same thing. All right. The reason I'm spreading it across all 3 dimensions here is, as you can see, even though it's 300 individually, it's much less than 300 there. So I'm just kind of exploiting Pythagoras. There we go. And now down to tens. So if I added 10 here, you can see it would nearly add 10 meters per second to the cost, where if I add it to one of these, it's not anywhere near 10 to the cost. So that's why I'm just adjusting these like so, and even less than that. I'm not going to be planning the perfect burn that will get me to, because I want to be at about 60 kilometers, yeah, pretty much at about that when I come back, like 55 to 65 kilometers. In my experience with the Gemini, I can fly and get it back. So that's about what I'm aiming for. I believe this is within the delta V of this craft. I kind of did a quick back of the spreadsheet calculation yesterday, and that was the case. So I'm just going to save here just in case that's not the case, and I have to kind of fine-tune it a bit better. But it feels about right. This is, I think when I was setting it up in test, it was 240 meters per second, but close enough. So I think, judging by the time of math, I think this is like Thailand. This is Southeast Asia. Everything looks really pretty because we are over the Terminator. And so I'll just slowly warp away from the Earth, because if something goes wrong, this is the last time these astronauts will be seeing the Earth, or from this close at least. All right, and then we fly over the daytime side, and you can see a bit more of the features of the Earth out there. And we're not losing. And I've noticed that before. I don't know if it's specific to the time warp that I'm currently at. Here, let me pop out of the time warp. Oh, no big delta V blow off. Or maybe just because we're currently in the shadow of the Earth, but we're really not bleeding off anything. I did notice that seems to happen sometimes after an engine burn in my tests. I don't know why that really doesn't make sense, because I would expect the engines to generate more heat, and then with time that heat to kind of creep up into the tank and boil off some of the fuel. But I don't know. It could just also be that it's a relatively low warp. It could also be, of course, I'm looking at just the delta V and not these numbers. It could also be that I had thrown away a ton of liquid oxygen before, and so it was losing liquid hydrogen during that time. Again, standard boilerplate Kyle statement. A super handy reason to record these videos is I can be looking at the wrong thing, thinking the wrong thing, and I can go back and look at the video later and actually look at the right numbers and come to the right conclusion. I don't have to just be bound to the ignorance of my first guess. So another thing you can do, let me slow down, warp a bit. Yeah, I'll be grabbing my own science later, don't you worry. So I'll be doing this later if I end up using liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen for some of my, for other like on-orbit construction stuff, is to orient yourself in relation to the sun. So I think down is what I want. Oh, I quick saved, which means I lost my earlier quick save, but that's okay. So effectively, by putting the crew between the tank and the sun, it should reduce the boil-off of the liquid hydrogen in this tank. And I've done it in some previous tests where I kind of set up, it was like pretty much a Saturn-V in various configurations. Sometimes where I just actually brought the second stage up to orbit, and then I would kind of dump, the big second stage of the Saturn-V, and I would dump fuel into it with time and kind of use it as an orbital fuel depot. So I would orient that big craft kind of like this, where the sun comes from that direction. So I want as much of the light to be incident on this part of the craft, which I'm totally fine taking in a bit of extra heat, and rather than it being absorbed by the tankage here, which I would prefer not to take in heat. So since I went into warp and went out of warp a number of times here, I just want to make sure that there weren't any little jolts of acceleration in the wrong direction that will have changed my trajectory so that it's not as close to the moon as I want it to be. I don't think it did. It looks like that's about the number I recall before. Lower than 5,000 is really the key here. And it looks like I'm still losing about the same amount of liquid hydrogen, but that's okay. Because really this is sort of just an experimenter just to mention the concept to you guys. So you can see actually we're getting a little less boil-off over time. And actually in time warp you can see that we are also getting some boil-off of liquid oxygen. Just a lesser amount. Right. So warping towards the moon. Where is Earth? So even after not that many hours after our burn, we've traveled very far away from the Earth. We're rapidly losing speed, which makes sense because we're moving so fast earlier in that phase. Oh, and of course we've slowed down so it can let me know, just so you know, the launch pad is ready again. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So Earth is pretty much gone down there now. And it's still going to be a ways until I can spot the moon. I'm sure we're close enough now that... ooh, whoa, nice. Thank you, camera. Camera just twitched, assuming us entering the sphere of influence of the moon. And that still looks like it's under 5,000 kilometers, so that is awesome. All right. Let us focus on the moon itself. Focus view. Oh, good. That will do what I want. I usually just double-click. Okay, and we've got the burn set up when we're close enough. All right, so let's just warp until we're a bit closer yet. So we still have a bit of delta V, so I'm going to do what I did before. So this is unrealistic, but you know me, in this series, I do the unrealistic thing all the time, unfortunately. So in practice, I did kind of set up this maneuver and this distance such that there is enough delta V in this service module with the NTO and MMH. There is enough there to carry out the burn that I've planned here. I did the math and it was like it was more than I thought, like 350 or 400 and some meters per second of delta V in the service module, but that is in fact the case. But as you can tell, these numbers are pretty close to each other. And in fact, I've got way more liquid oxygen than I need, so I'm just going to bleed off that extra. But at this point, initially, I had really believed that the Centaur would have just lost too much liquid oxygen by this point. All right, dump. Don't want to dump a ton, obviously. It's not having a huge impact on my delta V, it's just, I don't know. It makes the voices quieter in my head when I do the thing that makes sense, even if I don't really need to do it. Okay, so we've got close, and we've got enough delta V there, so I'm going to carry that out. So first, let's point at the node. And we're not going to get to space low, like space over moon low, or whatever it would precisely be called. But there is going to be plenty of sweet, sweet science for us to carry out. An EVA in space high over the moon should probably, it's still a big, huge accomplishment, even if we don't get a ton of science from it. All right, so I'm just going to do another quick save, and yeah, I'll wait until we're nearer this closest approach before I do this. Okay, so now we're 20 minutes away from the closest approach to the moon. We're just 3,300 kilometers over the moon. So with such a relatively small launcher by historical standards, we were able to throw 2 people with enough life support supplies to survive it to fly around the moon. Now the question is, can Kyle not screw up and return them? That is a big question. Okay, so, oh yeah, I made a list. Let me pull that list out. I didn't make it a complete list, but there's a lot of things to do on this mission that I don't want to screw up, so I noted it down. So first, let's take a bunch of science. Review photographs. I think that's new. I want to take new photographs. Film return, yeah. Log temperature, yeah, there's no new science there. That's fair. Log radiation. Yeah, there. Turns out there's some new science there. What else? Crew report isn't new. I remember that, but I'll do it anyway. Crew report. Crew report. Oh no, well, apparently it is new. Okay. Oh, it's telemetry. Sorry, telemetry is the one that isn't new. That makes some sense. What else? I think that's everything except the EVA. So we've got the pilot and the engineer. So in my tests, Kathy was the one who came out. So this time it's going to be Gregory, EVA. I mean, both of them could do, and there we go. We got a nice EVA report, a decent amount of science, not huge. Through a lot of the early interplanetary stuff I've recently done and will probably be doing more of in the future, we will probably get more science for some things. But come on now. Gregory, where's the moon? You came out here. You came out all this way. There we go. Okay, good. So from where you are, you can, in fact, see the moon. And, let's take the risk. Let us let go. Would you kindly orient yourself such that you are kind of more so looking towards the moon? No. Gregory is terrified. All right. Fair enough. He is just not going to go look down at the moon. Just going to look down through the bottom of his visor. Okay, fair enough. So you've got your science. I suppose we'll have to let you back into the spacecraft since there's nobody else here who wants your seat. F to grab. No, not to let go. There we go. B to board again. All right. So we are oriented. We've got enough delta V left in this, which we really shouldn't. There's this tiny bit of delta V. I don't remember if we've adjusted these numbers. Nathan can help you whenever you end up watching this video. Thought we had come to this agreement or solution that it made sense that some of these engines with lots of relights would eat a bit more of the fuel in a relight. I don't recall if we've implemented that yet. Just kind of as a realism, but also a little bit of a balance mechanic. So if something has like 10 or 50 relights like this, there's a reason to not just pulse the engine like you would in stock. Because really anything that's kind of a stock behavior, we in Realism Overhaul look down on. Even if it's potentially doable in reality, we don't like it. Like pulsing the engine a ton. Or shutting down an engine before you reach orbit. Why I never. That's not a thing that we like to do. We never. All right, so we got to see a little bit of the lit side of the moon when we're close, but really it just wasn't a nice trajectory to see a lot of the lit side of the moon when we're this close. But I'm sure the optical hardware and such they had on board would have been cool enough to take some really good pictures on their own. I just didn't bring any additional equipment other than what was in this in the service module, which on my checklist here says, please transfer some of this science over to these guys because the service module is not going to come home with us today, but this is. So I need to use this tool to transfer the science over. But first, let's complete this burn. Quick save, quick save, quick save. Point at node, and let's see, ullage, get the engine stable. Holding H. Oh, okay, so the little jets are barely visible there. All right, execute node. So it's going to warp just the extra minute or so into the future and then carry out that burn. I don't think it's terribly important that it's at this very specific moment, but yeah, still willing to make use of these awesome tools in MechDrive to get it as close to planned as possible. And then we'll do a light adjustment. There we go, engines chirp up. See, one of the reasons I'm cheating, I feel like I'm cheating by using the little residuals that are in this for this, but anyway, the reason I'm doing that is because the G-force for for these engines is just way better than from this, and I didn't want to try to think and fill enough time to wait for the burn on that to carry out 200 and some meters per second. So there we go. Actually, before we screw it, just drop it. It's going to give us a little bit more of an oomph, which will actually have some impact. That's the technical term, a little of an oomph. in pushing off that stage. But that's okay, we can correct it with the service module. So focus on Earth. I want to end up way closer than that, so let's just turn on the RCS and gear it up. So even here, just doing whatever little correction I'm doing right now to get this down to about 60 kilometers is going to take some time. So while that is going on, actually I can't see the number that I want to see when I'm out here. So I'll have to be over here, and I just, this is something I learned from Nathan Kell not terribly long ago. I really can't believe it's been a feature for very long, but maybe I'm just bad, but if I right click on it, it continues to show it, even though I'm not there, which is great. So Gemini Lunar, these are resources. I don't want resources. I want to transfer science. Gemini adapter into cabin. Transfer, 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 keep, transfer, transfer. I don't know if it's taking time to do that, or maybe some of it doesn't transfer, like maybe the film. I'm pretty sure the film would still have to transfer. I think that's kind of one of the mechanics, if you will, of a realism overhaul, or RP-0 science, whereas you can take the film and then you can put it in a little film return bucket. Alright, so let's see, anything in the adapter segment? There's a module science experiment, expand, collapse, so Geiger counter, film return camera. So I want those in the cabin here. So could you please transfer? Film return already stored in the module. Okay, so I don't know why it's still saying that they're in there, but it's, you know, science doesn't matter a ton to me, but I would like this to be a legitimately useful tutorial, or this is how you do a thing that you would like to do. So realism is off, or data is transferable. I don't understand. Added, okay, so when I shrunk it, that did it. Okay, so it seemed like when I opened up those displays, it was willing to transfer, because now they're showing all the science over in Gemini cabin, which is what I want. Good, thanks. All right, so it's still burning down, so now I'm going to time warp. It doesn't really matter to me where I hit. There is a detail that you could definitely, if you want to do better than I do, which hopefully everybody who watches this does, because I feel like I don't do many things to perfection. So in theory, you'd not only want to return your people safely, but if you want to do it with a little bit of pizzazz, and you'd want to land somewhere in the ocean. In my test, I landed somewhere in Africa, which is not ideal. So you could kind of do the time, like you could look at, okay, it's going to hit this, like let's say, it actually does park itself here, and it says, okay, this is, whoa, looks like it's doing crazy things. I don't know why. Maybe it's just having trouble controlling its orientation. That's just kind of wobbly. Weird. Sorry, anyway, so let's say it was going to hit this spot, and it said it's going to be 2 days until you get there. Exactly 2 days. Well, that means the Earth is going to do like pretty much 2 exact rotations, and we're actually going to press down, hit the spot on the surface where we're over. But generally, of course, this number isn't exactly that. So you could do the calculation of, okay, what orientation will the Earth be in 17 hours, right? Like if you look up the spot that you're going to hit, whatever its latitude and longitude are, well, the Earth rotates through a certain number of whichever one of those is the right one, latitude and longitude. I'm not even going to try to think of which one it is at the moment. But you know, the Earth will rotate in such a way that we can predict, you know, it's going to be a certain spot over here. And I think there might be mods like Trajectories kind of does that. MechJeb might even do something like that, but I don't think it will do it when I'm out of the influence of the planet in question. So I will just leave that as an exercise to the reader. Whoa, we're actually getting further away from that. Well, that's not cool. I must not have been pointed smartly at all. So I'm just going to kind of let it tumble and just hold N, because that is causing this number to go down. So anyway, if you can do the calculation or select the right mod to figure out exactly where you're going to come down. What? Weird. The RCS is just running when the RCS is on. Something is up. Something is weird. Because when oh right. Why is the RCS running when I turn it on? Because I still had the RCS engine throttled all the way up. That's why. Okay. There we go. Let's correct this back down. Yeah, the engine on the Gemini service module is modeled like a like RCS. There's another version that I've configured like an engine, but I prefer to use this one. simply because of that it's, I don't have to worry about ignitions or other interesting engine behavior. It's just behaving as RCS I find is the most sane. So you could adjust this. You could see that as I was doing those burns, that time was changing. So particularly, let's say it'll be a bit easier once I've allowed myself to escape from the moon. You could make various maneuvers. You could set up a maneuver node or just do maneuvers where you don't really change the area you're going to come down, but you maybe lob yourself just a little bit more, so it takes another minutes or hours to come down, and that will allow the Earth to rotate into a position where you would like to land. Pause, since right now I guess we haven't seen that and I haven't actually experienced the time yet. So if we look at where we're going to come down, we can see specifically where that is on the Earth and how far in the future that is. People who are good at coordinate systems or simply at solving this specific task, you can go ahead and try to predict what position the Earth is going to be in 2 days and 17 hours from now. Where do you think we're actually going to end up coming down? I'm truly not good at this kind of thing, so my best guess would be, because I just did everything kind of similar to what I did in one of my tests, my guess would be Africa. But really, I don't know. That's probably not a terrible guess, because it's 17 hours is, 7 hours less than a full day, so 7 hours back this way, perhaps somewhere in Africa. So in practice, I might want to make this closer to maybe a little more than that period of time, because, ideally, NASA just really loves to land things in the Pacific. They just love to land in the Pacific, and so that would probably be more ideal. But because I do all of this stuff in one take, and I prefer not to do quick loads and such, even though I do still sometimes, I am going to just live with how I have it, and let's head towards Earth. Ooh, how about that tumble? All right, so we're going to switch reference frames in 9 hours, 10 hours, and we have enough life support. This is just a standard Gemini. It's too standard of a Gemini, in my opinion. I was kind of kicking myself and feeling dumb when I realized that I may not have enough delta V to do that correction maneuver that I had planned there. Oh, and one thing I totally should have looked at was something I really should have looked at when we were near there. See, it's acting like we didn't. Oh no, okay, it's acting like we haven't completed the contract. That's true. So we did complete that one, which makes total sense. We're throwing something towards the moon, throwing people towards the moon will make them go faster than 9,000 meters per second. I can definitely agree with that and shrink these. So we have not completed this contract. So it makes sense we have not got a completion, but we did get the check mark for being in the right place relative to the moon. And it definitely should not be called crewed lunar orbital, because I just did a crewed lunar flyby. Actually, here's a lazy way for me to figure out exactly where we may land. Let me just wait until it's exactly 2 days in the future. Yeah, we're just gonna be a bit Ooh, this is not an ideal place to land at all in reality, is it? So, sure, it's near Africa, which isn't so bad, but it is approaching the South Pole. So if we actually hit the atmosphere here and skid even further, we were kind of moving towards Antarctica. So, yeah, I don't know. I kind of would love to see another generation or a group of people who do RP-0 videos on YouTube and actually have the fortitude and attention span to do everything correct, including having their crew come back in a sane and logical place airtime. I'd love to see that, but I'm not that person. So it looks like, that's my best guess, they will be near Africa. So we will maybe get to see Madagascar. It looks like this will be a really potentially a cool path to be tracking down over. That'll be some really cool terrain to see on the way down. I did I did a bunch of different maneuvers when I was doing tweaking of graphic stuff, where I wanted to see how the Earth and all the various mods appeared at different altitudes, and so I set up a craft, hyper edited a craft into this is a long time ago, many months ago now, into a trajectory. I'm not sure which. I assume we're heading down this way, right? Where I would come down and do a skip re-entry over the UK, and I would try to land in the English Channel every time. So a surprising number of times I was able to successfully. We're coming the other way. We're going to come over the South Pole. Oh, well, that's a shame. So we won't be flying over Egypt. So it was really cool to see, because I also set everything up so it was also near sunrise or sunset, and it was a really beautiful sight to come flying down over the UK, see the British Isles grow in the camera, and then eventually, you get so close, you're seeing all the city lights, and then you skip off the atmosphere, like 60 kilometers above London, and then come down in the English Channel. So it was a sight to behold. Kind of wish I'd recorded that one, but there's so many, obviously because I was doing graphical tweaks of various visual settings. Most of the flights before and after that looked crappy, and that one just happened to look really nice. So it would have just been within like a bulk set of footage that looked bad. So you can see South America there very clearly since we are oh so far away. Oh, I should set up a. So here, let me look at my checklist. Set up course correction if necessary, didn't have to. Right, set up, move the resource over, which is the next thing I'll do after this. So that's the spot we're actually going to come down. That is in just an hour from now. Oh wow, all right. So that's another thing I don't remember. I need to, of course, I need to rewatch Apollo 13 for like the 11 billionth time. Because I don't remember exactly how Earth looked to them, because they did show some in the movie. They were showing some footage from like an hour or half an hour out from landing, and in doing this, what I'm doing right now, I'm surprised by how far away from the Earth you still are at that point. Because we are an hour away from hitting the atmosphere. Apologies, this video is going to be a little longer than the average one, simply because we're almost back. And I was just testing, I do have ambient light adjust off, so it looks beautiful on my screen. I'm not sure precisely how it will end up looking in the video, but it's really nice. The Earth is lighting our craft very nicely from the side here, and we can see much of Earth very nicely. So let's just orient somewhat with that. So I'm going to drop the service module a little under an hour out. But the last thing on my checklist that I have not done yet, oh, sorry, so one quick thing I wanted to mention again, this is so shamefully just a Gemini, it still has the solid retro engine, which served no purpose at all. It's like 200 kilograms of solid rocket and rocket fuel that I brought along that I did not need to. That's how shamefully just a Gemini I was throwing. So let's click on both of these, my regular way of transferring resources. So this is the Gemini cabin, which will be heading home. So let's transfer the wastewater out. Let's transfer water in, oxygen in, and then soon we will be dumping this. And I'll check if there's any more science to take. For all I know, there might still be some available. All right, so analyze telemetry. Oh, I don't want to overwrite. And something I haven't revealed yet, of course, in this video, is that I forgot to put any kind of antenna on this, so I can't just do duplicate science. Insert laughter here. So I get no science if these guys don't get back, but I think that's fair. It's a high-stakes mission. I don't know. Well, maybe it must have auto-taken photos or something. I don't know, with the way I have the various science mods set up. Anyway, I transferred the science. I'm pretty sure, yeah, it says that I've got lots of science in here. That's a good enough. Oh, let me make sure the film return from space. Yeah, photographs taken indeed. Photographs taken indeed. All right, so this is about where I want to be. Let us just warp a little closer to Earth before we drop the service module. So in practice, we still have lots of life support supplies left in this thing. And let's save in case I screw up. All right, and decouple. So you can see we still had all the food remaining. We've lost the energy supplier, which this isn't going to tell us for various reasons of how we actually have energy consumption set up in RP-0. It's actually a negative generator, which this mod doesn't pick up. That was just the most straightforward way to get consistent power usage. Alright, and then we're going to fly over the South Pole here, and it looks like we're in a strange craft orientation, but the math says, the node says this is a smart orientation to take, and now we're getting really close to the Earth. We're flying over the South Pole. Oh, actually, so now if I think of the path the other way, we're going to skip kind of up into this water, which isn't too bad. Isn't too bad at all. at least by my standards, which are we going to land in the ocean? If yes, good for you. Realistically, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody watching. Ooh, this looks so nice. But did America always land, all the crewed capsules that landed in the ocean that actually went to, say, orbit and weren't just a suborbital test, did they all land in the Pacific? Because I thought that was true. I think that is the case. Are we still time warped or what? Oh, right, I still have these locked. Haha. The RCS was not going off. So I don't want to be pointed that way. So another indulgence for myself, because really that's all this series is. It's space indulgences for Kyle. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to, do I have enough time? Ooh, it's getting close. Okay, MechJeb, open up MechJeb. I want to pull up the flight recorder because I love graphs. So altitude, surface speed, acceleration. So let's just go with those two for now, and mark. And so this is going to be a graph. So obviously we're coming down. Surface speed, and our surface speed should be increasing because gravitational potential is turning into speed, as you can see there. So we're speeding up, and I'll be changing the scale of this as time goes on. But I really feel like these skip trajectories, or whatever, the lifting trajectories, look really cool in a graph. So, and that's good. This is a little deep of a bite. Usually I stick closer to 60 kilometers. The margins for survival, particularly for Gemini on a lunar return, are not great, and so it's good to stick to those standards. Oh, we're really not rotating. We're really holding position well. All right, so I'm going to set the actual mark now that we're actually at atmospheric interface. We're starting to get, not quite. Soon, very soon, we will be getting impact from the atmosphere. So right now, I'm set up for maximum lift. That is the position I am in. Turn descent mode on. Right as we hit the atmosphere at 140 kilometers up. You can see I've got God rays on. Some part of the craft I dumped is casting a God ray. Yeah, I wish I could make this graph just a little smaller so we could see more of the Earth, but right now it's just ocean includes. So, all right, so we're going to start. We're starting to get some deceleration. We're continuing to drop. So the way I'm currently oriented, it's going to kind of take to its lifting orientation soon, and it's going to produce the maximum amount of lift in this position, which I'm doing because I would prefer if this was about 60 kilometers. And of course, during this descent, I'm going to flip around a lot. Oh, cool! There we go. And the God ray disappears as whatever, probably my service module. I'm surprised the service module is still so close because we dumped it pretty far away from the Earth. All right, and we're coming down, and the clouds are starting to look a bit different. The ocean's starting to look a bit different, and oh man, our G-forces are climbing. All right, I'll just rotate a little bit so you can see the fact that I'm producing this lift is in fact impacting our current lowest expected altitude. And oh man, those G-forces are coming up. They're not crazy though. That's nice. They are not crazy. I'd like to keep the G-forces of this reentry below 7 Gs or 6 Gs if possible, but I don't know if that's possible given how kind of imprecise I was with that initial, I'll call it a periapsis. Okay, 3.5 Gs. So it'll peak close-ish to where we actually level out, where this vertical speed hits null, where we actually kind of hit whatever this is when it stops changing. All right, 4.5 Gs. But not quite that, because as we travel towards that and as we travel away from that point in time, we're also slowing down quite a bit. Oh, so the G's peaked not terribly high. So because I'm somewhat comfortable with bouncing, I'm going to stay a bit to the side because I don't want to. We're not slow enough now that if I stayed pointed to produce maximum lift, we might actually bounce out of the atmosphere and not make it home okay, which is not okay with me. So I'm going to kind of try to stay at this point. Manage the vertical speed to kind of stay at about the same altitude, because I don't want to skip too high, because as you can see, as time continues to go on, we're getting less G-forces, and therefore I have less influence on our trajectory. But I wouldn't mind traveling a bit further along our path here. So I'm pretty sure we've slowed down enough now that I can just do this. So we are going to bounce substantially now that I do this, but we were slowed down enough that we're still going to come back within seconds or a minute or so. And we should start gaining altitude soon. So, and that's going to, but the fact that we're climbing out of the atmosphere as well as slowing down is rapidly going to reduce our acceleration. And so we're kind of losing the back part of that graph, but I mean, it's, you know, you see what it looks like. It's not terribly interesting or impressive. Shout out to any graph fans out there. This graph looks awesome. So we're bounced up. We're really not getting too much of an increased altitude from that. Like if I had reoriented the craft earlier, we would have been able to skip a bit higher, but there you can see the hills of, I would assume is Madagascar, or no, probably not Madagascar, some part of Africa. Oh no, maybe, yeah, that is Madagascar. All right, just thought we might have gotten past that by now. So we're still heading down, and we're just kind of, we're slower, but we still have a lot of energy to dissipate. So if you look here, you can see how much chart ablator we've produced, which is a lot, and how much ablator we still have remaining, which is less than the amount of chart ablator. That's kind of the way we had set up the, Nathan Kell and I had decided was a good way to set up the Gemini and the Apollo hardware, where the Gemini is, in every way that we can control, is kind of a marginal reentry vehicle from a lunar speed. It's definitely, like, if you don't quite have the experience with doing a lunar Gemini return like I have here, it's probably good to use that solid surface module to slow down, or something else to slow you down a bit before you bring the Gemini back into the atmosphere at lunar speeds. But I've done this so many times now that I usually don't have too much trouble with it. And you can see our G-forces are coming back up, which is cool. So you can see we really kind of lobbed, and we really leveled off, which is surprisingly like kind of what they'd want to do, what Gemini or Apollo would want to do. They wouldn't want to bounce up too high because there's that risk that you didn't quite calculate it right, and you're gonna bounce up for minutes or more, kind of up into the thin atmosphere. All right, really feels like we're not seeing ocean, even though we should see ocean. There we go. And then the ocean is dependent on which way we're looking. Well, that's not cool. That's not Raven at all. Okay, let's produce as much bounce as we can, because as you can see, we're now hitting a second more intense level of G-forces, which I kind of expected because we didn't bleed off much of that speed originally. I kind of like to turn the camera to see stuff over there, but you can see there's an island, and we've got this crazy transparent ocean. I feel like this only happens to me when I have scatter controlling the ocean, but I could be wrong. For the longest time, I would just say, no, scatter ocean, you're not worth it. But that was because I've got something crazy with my graphics card. It just makes the MIP maps, that's a real word in graphics apparently, a MIP map, do weird things. All right. And such that the ocean, like the kind of the nice wavy pattern, actually just looked like static for me, which clearly, you know, didn't look very nice. So I didn't catch what the peak acceleration was, but oop, that is not the button I want. Is it Alt 12? No, I'm not gonna. Is it Alt? See, I don't want to accidentally quick load. Or there we go, Alt 3. Max G-forces endured. Wow, we kept the G-forces really low. If that number is not a big fat liar. Okay. So yeah, we had a good re-entry. That's very nice. Let's just close that out. Oof, come on, let me see the water. Make it look like water. Why look like water? Sorry for messing with the camera. Just thinking if maybe some camera angle would let the ocean look like water, but it just doesn't want to. Okay, so we'll look that way because that island looks nice, and the water looks like water over there. Okay, no reason to dump that cover since we didn't end up doing any docking, so let's switch those around. Far says we are almost below Mach 1. Okay, fair enough. And the atmosphere is still really not very dense. I mean, now it's denser than anywhere on Mars as far as I know, but still. Okay, so now we're below Mach 1, so I feel like it's safe to... Okay, apparently that was wrong. Apparently I was incorrect about it being safe. Goodbye, nose cone that tried to kill us. I don't know what part of the... Oh, that's just debris. Cool. Not all the debris broke up. All right. So that's nice. So would hope that the the Navy would have had a craft in this area to recover our Geminauts, our first crew members to fly around the moon, and so far, almost make it home safely. Kind of as good as could. Thanks, Ocean. The Ocean is not cooperating. As close to a perfect mission so far as could be. Alright, and the drogue chute is good. It slowed us down to still a terrifying speed. My physics brain always multiplies numbers by 3.6 because that turns it to kilometers an hour. So 40 times 3.6 is still over 100 kilometers an hour, and I would not would not want to hit the water at over 100 kilometers an hour. So we're definitely going to want to make sure the main chute fires. All of this chute just kind of disappears on its own. That's the way it seems to be configured, which is good because that's it tells me when to stage this one. All right, and now we will slow down to for our final descent to the surface of the water. I kind of wanted to see the nice pattern that the sun makes on the water, but that's a no-go today. All right, let's just turn back in the direction we're allowed to look. I really need to reset up my graphic settings. Oh wow, this video ended up being way longer than I expected it to be. I had way too much time and fun with that re-entry. But anyway, yeah, so Nathan Kell plugging through like an hour to 3 hours of videos every day. He has recently landed crew on the moon and has either returned them safely to Earth or is in the process of that. Either way, congratulations to him. And I am just completing my first 2 crew member fly by the moon and return safely to Earth. So hooray for me, but nowhere near the accomplishment because Nathan Kell started way later than I did and in real time in making videos. And made his accomplishment much earlier because he spends way more time making videos than I do. Despite the fact that he also, during his, of course, his day job is working on KSP. All right. And one of his other major hobbies is really managing the Realism Overhaul, RSS, and RP-0 communities. It's a Kerbal spaceship machine. All right, so we get to see what the waves look like in this direction, which is nice. And then we should get a soft touchdown on the water very shortly. And I can consider the Saturn-1 Centaur-Gemini mission a success when we recover this Gemini capsule. Recover vessel. I'd have to look at the space records. I'm not sure who the first person to do an EVA in orbit of the moon is, or if that was ever done. I think it must have. Oh yeah, it must have been done. Perhaps one of the Apollo crew members recovering a camera from the service module at some point. It's just there's so much other stuff going on in a moon mission that doing an EVA in the sphere of influence of the moon isn't the most impressive thing they're doing in those missions. So lots and lots of science. We should have completed a contract. That should show up in here. Indeed we did. And we got some nice cash for that, which should help. So I'll convert that into advancement points and have to think about what we're going to do next. So thanks for watching RP-0 America. We have successfully returned 2 crew members from a flyby of the moon. Goodbye.